Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and for the start of the Heist League, as you can see, I did my best to attempt to be some sort of stealthy, heisting Catwoman thing, and rob an Exalted Orb, bail out, and yeah, look, it worked pretty well, I think. But in any case, let's get to the meat of the video, and that is the league starters, and in particular the one that I picked was Hexblast, and that's what I'll be talking about mostly for this video, which is one of the starters that I originally listed in my video. As well as that though, for the other starters, I think the steel skills, mostly Shattering Steel, is doing okay from what I've heard. The blazing salvos on totems, for some people it's okay, for some people it's a little bit wonky. I personally leveled as blazing salvo until I got Hexblast, so it was okay up to that point. And then crackling lance and some other things that I've heard are just kind of shitty for starters. This build included is not very great as a starter, so if you pick something new and something different from the new patch, then chances are you're not very happy with the current starting situation. I'd say most of the builds and the skills are going to take a little bit more established gear or a little bit more established knowledge into exactly how we're going to build them. So don't feel too dissuaded. Plenty of people are struggling just as much as you are if you're not having a great time with the new stuff or the changed stuff. I've heard good things about igniting discharge, burning discharge though, so that's a positive. In any case, let's talk about my starter, which is Hexblast. So it is the occultist character. I did try and build Hexblast into essentially just full sort of cold resist based. It's always going to be chaos damage still, so the idea is that the enemy will be taking chaos damage, but it'll be based off of its lowest resist, and you can't really stack minus chaos resist very easily, which is why you stack some other element, and I've chosen to go minus cold. So we have frostbite, Ellie weakness, the occultist ascendancy, and that makes the enemy pretty weak to cold resist, and that's what our chaos damage is going to be based off of. So the idea is currently that I'm running around with blasphemy temp chains. Everything is always perma slowed, and even with just the temp chains, there's no doom on the enemy. You can actually Hex Blast off of that, but it'll be a very weak Hex Blast, so it's good enough only to clear packs. Whereas otherwise, for the most part, we are self-casting Frostbite with Impending Doom, which is a secondary little explosion that's not Hex Blast, and then also self-casting Ellie Weakness. So I've got two self-cast curses because they both generate their own separate doom, and then that means that I can attack twice when they're both at their max doom. What this has led to is a pretty weak build in the leveling and the gearing up phases. So from level 28 when I first picked it up, all the way up to about 78 maybe, it was pretty lackluster, I'm not gonna lie. We cleared okay, clear speed was not too bad, single target damage basically didn't fucking exist, and at this point you can see that in my tier 1 to 4 or 5 maps, I finally have enough sort of crit multi, and reliable damage to actually one-shot most things, which is how the playstyle should be for it to be smooth. It's still quite a lot of Korean StarCraft level APM to actually play, pull off, and enjoy this type of a build, but we're kind of getting there at this stage. For the most part, I think this is still how you're supposed to play this skill, Hex Blast, but with possibly much better gear and much better scenarios where you're going to be one-shotting endgame. It might still taper off. Aside from that, I think it's just an Archmage Ignite thing, like a lot of other people have been relegated into doing, and that is just building with lots of mana, using Archmage, and then igniting and scaling Ignite, which is a bit of a sad case if the best case for scenario for this skill ends up just being, well, give it some Archmage, give it some Ignite, and that's all there is to it, then it's a pretty failed skill. But I'm doing my best to make it a just big front-loaded hit, cold damage, or chaos damage based off cold res, and see how we go. And so far, we have taken down bosses, and I haven't felt too bad about it, so I'll definitely give it at least another day. And also, I want to go ahead and show you how I've built the character and how it's progressed for me so far. So here is my humble little character, level 82 occultist called Catman Woman, and it is based off of the Hexblast skill, as I mentioned. It's pretty much been point for point, copy for copy of what I listed in my starter video. The main difference is that we have taken elemental equilibrium because that gives us an even better source for negative cold resist, and we just need some source outside of cold damage to trigger that. And in this case it is Stormbrand, or a lot of the time it was Orb of Storms, but now it's Stormbrand, and as well as that you can get a little bit of fire or lightning damage onto your rings, your weapon, whatever, just so that your actual Hexblast itself will be hitting for for lightning or fire, thus giving elemental equilibrium as well. But this is a much more reliable way through every single hit, especially your first hit as well. So other than that, the passive tree I think is roughly exactly as I detailed it out to be, and nothing really has changed there. We are going for all of the curse stuff, trying to get our doom rate going. So there are two different ways you can build this sort of thing with the way I've done it, and that is go for your doom rate so that you hit maximum doom on your auto curse. So you run around, hit your frostbite, and that gets you to maximum doom in about 1.5 seconds or so. Or you can build with no doom rate whatsoever, so take out all of these sorts of passives and then grab Doomsday, and what that does is when you actually drop your curse, it'll have a 1 second delay and then give maximum doom to that enemy straight away. But difference is you won't have any doom immediately, so if you want to play with a bit of a quicker play style and just like drop a curse and then Hexblast immediately, you won't really be able to do it. So I did play a little bit with Doomsday, but I don't know, I think I'm okay with the way I'm currently doing it. They'll probably try a bit more Doomsday in the future and see if it's a little bit more intuitive or worth doing. But what's actually happening is I am running around. I am, for the most part, dropping at least one curse and then hitting my Hexblast, and things blow up. If I need to, and it's a bit of a thicker rare monster or pack of enemies, then sometimes you'll add the other curse, or sometimes you just wait a little bit of time so that the doom builds up to a higher percentage for your Hexblast damage, because it's 50% more per 5 doom, and you can go up to 44 or 40 doom at the moment, because we have not taken this little passive here. Since this isn't maximum doom, this is just starting with an extra 4 doom. So with that context, it's a pretty shitty node, I think. So we've got 40 maximum doom, and it takes like 1.5 to 2 seconds to build up, so you do have to wait just a little bit for it to actually go off. It's got a very low crit chance, as we saw to begin with, and until you actually have a lot of crit from the passive tree and from like various stuff like this staff here, it will just feel shit, and it will be very high rolly. Occasionally you hit the crit and things feel good, but that's the biggest problem. We've built into crit, and it takes a while to get there. So currently my links are Hexblast, Crit Strikes, Control Destruction, Added Chaos, and Void Manipulation. And then at the same time, my Frostbite also has Impending Doom, which is just going to be like a secondary blast, but dealing a little bit less damage. So it's attached to Frostbite, Added Chaos, and Void Manipulation. And ideally, I think I'm still just going to do a 5 or a 6 link in my staff and have, on this exact same setup, also Early Weakness attached, so that both of my curses will have an Impending Doom, so that when I self-cast them, they stack up their Doom. I will trigger it with Hexblast and get 2 explosions off of each of those as well. It's a little bit confusing, but it kind of starts to make sense once you play it. We have additionally got a Blasphemy Temp Chain, so that's happening all of the time, and I use that because I want to be a bit more defensive and then have my own offensive curses casted whenever I need to. And then just recently picked up some Vixen's Entrapment, and the idea behind these is they won't ever, whatever curse you actually throw out through this auto curse system won't have any doom. It's just to have an additional curse. And in this case, I've decided to try and get a little bit more damage as well, and that is putting Assassin's Mark on there. So every single time I throw out a Frostbite, I will Assassin Marks something, but you can only have one Assassin Mark out at a time. So this helps me keep up power charges, mana and life through clearing, and then on boss fights, it'll always be hitting the boss, and I'll always have 4 curses on that boss, and it should hit pretty hard in that context too. But you can chuck in something like Enfeeble here, so that every single time you're cursing, you're also throwing out an Enfeeble, and the enemy is also temp changed. So it gives you an additional curse, and they should be pretty worth using, but by no means mandatory. I only just then put them in recently. The rest of my gear is pretty much hot trash. Like this, a lot of this stuff is what I was using before even finishing story mode. And even though I've been mapping for 10, 12 levels, just about no upgrades there. I bought a staff with a crit base, but it had the temple mod just for cast speed, and I made sure it had something there to be able to craft my own cast damage, and that just helps up my crit rate. And I also bought a Gull that has Frostbite curse effect. Gull seems like a pretty good choice here. We do enjoy all of those little shrines as we go. Aside from that, there's not too much else to mention. Stormbrand with power charge on crit and arcane surge is pretty much strictly just so that we can get Ellie weakness, not Ellie weakness, Ellie equilibrium happening, and also a little bit of power charges. My aura is just zealotry with temp chains blasphemy. No heralds or anything. Can't use Herald of Ice like I originally proposed because we do want elemental equilibrium. My first 2 points went into Profane Bloom, then Malediction, then Void Beacon, and then lastly I'll grab Forbidden Power for a bit more area and reliable crit chance and power charges. Besides that, yeah, not too much else to mention. It's all pretty straightforward. It's not something I would recommend because it has been a bit of a struggle, but I'm getting there and I'm still having fun, so I'm going to keep doing it. Like I said, I've seen lots of people go Hexblast with Archmage and Ignite, and that seems to be going probably better pound for pound than what I'm doing, but going to try and make it work regardless and see how far we can push it. The other thing is Black Hole. Black Hole is pretty damn nice for heists and plenty of large monster situations. Just attach a Swift Affliction to it, and you can have 2 different ones, or you can have 2 uses, but only is allowed to have 1 up from time to time, and it's just a good little assist for our clear and safety. But for now, I think that's all I can say on the build. Hopefully, in the next video, I've got some more good news for you, or I will have benched the character and we've moved on. But hope you guys are enjoying Heist. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.